We invite you to listen to this intense, real-life story titled, "I Was Carrying My Twins During a Delivery." The father turned out to be the CEO, the result of a night of passion. My son sat directly in the president's chair, leaving the entire boardroom in shock and exclaiming, "He's a miniature copy of the ice-cold president." Before I could grab my children and run, he stopped me. He said one sentence that left me breathless. "The New York City sky in late autumn is as fickle as a teenager, shifting from sun to rain in an instant." An unexpected downpour fell with such force that it gave me no time to react. I hastily parked my old scooter under the canopy of a sycamore tree on the side of the road. I fumbled in the storage compartment for my thin plastic rain poncho. Behind me, in the delivery box, were the daily specials and a piping hot chicken and rice soup that I needed to deliver urgently. And in front, on the floorboard, my two little ones, Leo and Noah, huddled against each other like two kittens startled by the water. There had been an unexpected power outage at their daycare today, and the teachers had called all the parents to pick up their children early. I had no choice but to bring them with me to finish the last few deliveries of the day. Leo, the older one, already mature for his 4 years, pulled at the edge of his small raincoat to better cover his brother. His dark, bright eyes looked at me with concern. "Mom, are you cold?" I smiled and brushed the raindrops from his cheek. "Mommy's fine. You two stay put. As soon as I deliver this order, we'll go home and have dinner." This order was for the Sterling Group Tower, known as the city's economic fortress. The imposing glass building beside it reflected the streetlights like a liquid mirror. The customer was an employee working overtime who had ordered a chicken soup and several meals for his team. I took a deep breath, adjusted my poncho, and started the scooter. The building's security guard looked at the three of us, soaked like drowned rats, with a mixture of pity and disdain. He pointed us to a service entrance for delivery personnel and maintenance staff. "The main elevator isn't for delivery people, and watch your kids. Everything in here is expensive. If they break something, you couldn't afford it even if you sold your house." I nodded submissively. "Yes, sir," and I led the children through the back of the building. The entrance was filled with construction materials. It looked like they were renovating the service lobby. The dust and the deafening noise of power drills scared Noah. The younger one, always shy, clung to my leg. "Mommy, I'm scared," he whispered. "It's okay, honey. Mommy's here," I reassured him as I looked for the reception desk to sign for the delivery. The receptionist in the service lobby was a young woman with heavy makeup and a perpetual frown. She looked at me as if I were carrying a contagious disease. Her voice was sour. "Leave the food on that table. Sign here. And hurry up. You're getting the whole floor wet." While I was looking for a pen to sign the logbook, my two little ones were drawn to a stray cat, also soaking wet, that was slinking down an interior hallway. This area was a private access that led to the executive elevator, but today, due to the construction, the security barrier had been temporarily removed, leaving only a poorly placed warning tape. Leo, who adores animals, let go of his brother's hand and tiptoed toward the cat. Noah, seeing his brother move, ran after him. The luxurious golden elevator door was slightly ajar, perhaps because someone had just used it or it was under maintenance and they had forgotten to lock it. The cat slipped inside nimbly. The two children, full of curiosity, followed it. Just then, I finished signing. When I turned around, panic seized me when I didn't see my children. "Leo, Noah!" I screamed with all my might. Only the sound of the drills and the patter of rain outside answered me. I felt my heart stop. I ran toward the hallway, shouting their names. When I reached the elevator, the cold metal doors had already closed. The digital panel began to change numbers. The upward arrow blinked a mocking red. I pounded on the elevator door in desperation. "Open, please! Open the door!" The receptionist finally looked up and yelled at me. "What the hell are you doing? That's the president's private elevator. Who gave you permission to go near it?" My sons are inside." My voice broke. Tears welled up, mixing with the rainwater. "Please, help me. They're only 4 years old." She glanced at the floor indicator, and her face turned pale. "Oh my God, it's going up to the 68th floor. That's the strategic boardroom. The president is in a crucial meeting with foreign partners. Floor 68. That number fell on my chest like a lead weight. I knew that place. 5 years ago, I had been there under the most ironic circumstances of my life. I never imagined that fate would drag me and my children back to the place where our whole tragedy began. I no longer had the mind to listen to the receptionist lecture me about regulations or punishments. I saw the emergency staircase right next to it. Without a second thought, I pushed the door open and ran up, my steps echoing with urgency on the cold concrete stairs. I knew it was impossible to catch the elevator, but my mother's instinct compelled me to run until I found my children. The 68th floor of the Sterling Group building was designed like an isolated fortress, the place where billion-dollar decisions were made. The strategic boardroom was immense, with a thick velvet carpet that absorbed any sound. A very long mahogany table presided over the center, surrounded by gleaming black leather armchairs. The silence was so profound you could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning. Today was a particularly important day. The Sterling Group was negotiating a merger with a foreign partner. The tension was palpable on both sides. Every word of the contract was weighed with extreme care. At the head of the table sat Alexander Sterling, the group's president, a man known as the wolf of the business world for his cold-blooded nature. He wore a custom-tailored charcoal suit. His face was handsome but frigid, and his eyes, deep as a winter lake, were fixed on the documents. Suddenly, the chime of the elevator broke the solemn atmosphere. All eyes turned to the entrance. The heavy wooden door opened slowly, but instead of a subordinate or a secretary with documents, two small, wobbly figures appeared, Leo and Noah. As the doors opened, they looked around in bewilderment. The room was too large and luxurious for their young imaginations. Noah, still holding a half-eaten lollipop, saw his eyes light up when he discovered a tray of exquisitely arranged fresh fruit on the table. The little one, always a glutton, instantly forgot his mother's warnings and ran towards it. Being short, he had to stand on his tiptoes and grab the edge of the table to reach a bright red apple. His hand, sticky with saliva and sugar, left smudges all over some crucial documents and the valuable wood of the table. Meanwhile, Leo's reaction was completely different. He wasn't interested in the food. His gaze fixed on the imposing black leather presidential armchair at the end of the table, the place Alexander had just left vacant to take a phone call. With an innate curiosity and a strange self-assurance, Leo climbed into the armchair. The chair was enormous for his small body, but he sat up straight, crossed his arms over his chest, and stared intently at the board members who were watching him with their mouths agape. The entire boardroom was in shock. An elderly director with white hair took off his glasses, trembling, cleaned them, and put them back on, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He stammered, "Mr. President, how is it that you've shrunk?" The moment Leo sat in that chair, his aloof air, the way he furrowed his brow, and his piercing gaze were identical to Alexander's, like two peas in a pod. It wasn't just a superficial physical resemblance, but the aura that emanated from within him, something genetics could not deny. Just then, a side door opened. Alexander walked in, still holding his phone, with a murderous expression for the interruption of the meeting. He froze when he saw the scene. A child sitting smugly in his chair, and another smearing his work table with a lollipop. "What is all this?" Alexander's voice resonated, deep and heavy enough to silence the entire room. Leo turned to look at the man who had just entered. Two faces, one large and one small, met. The same angular profile, the same straight nasal bridge, and the same gaze without a hint of fear. In that instant, time seemed to stand still. The board members looked from Alexander to Leo, and the murmurs began to spread. "He looks too much like him. Could it be a secret son of the president? I thought he wasn't married." Alexander frowned and strode towards Leo. He didn't care about the gossip. He only felt that his territory had been invaded. He reached out to grab the child by the collar of his shirt and pull him down. Just at that moment, the main door burst open. I stormed in like a whirlwind, soaked, with disheveled hair, and out of breath after climbing nearly 68 floors by the stairs. "Don't hurt my children," I yelled, stepping in front of Leo, spreading my arms to protect him like a hen defending her chicks from a hawk. Alexander stopped, his hand suspended in the air. He looked at me, and his expression shifted from surprise to coldness, finally settling on my face, pale with exhaustion. For a moment, I saw his pupils contract, as if he were trying to find something familiar in his memory, but his usual coldness quickly took over again. "Who are you?" he asked in a voice as cold as ice. "Who allowed you to bring children here to cause this scene?" I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I knew I had just gotten myself into a monumental mess. Seeing the disaster Noah had caused on the table and the furious glares of everyone present, I knew that this time I would not only lose my job, but perhaps also the future of my children and myself. From behind me, Leo peeked out and looked directly at Alexander. His childish but firm voice rang out, "You can't scold my mom. You're mean." The boy's words were like adding fuel to the fire. Alexander's face darkened. Before he could say anything, Noah, frightened, burst into loud sobs. His clumsy little hand knocked over a cup of black coffee that was on the table. The dark liquid spilled, dripping onto the luxurious carpet. Terrified, Noah clung to my leg with his hands still sticky from candy, trembling and sobbing, unable to make a sound. Meanwhile, Leo, despite the mess he had just caused, stood firm in front of his little brother, his dark eyes fixed on the imposing man before him, showing not the slightest fear. Alexander glanced down at his impeccable pants, now stained with a large black mark. He didn't shout or explode in anger as I expected. His silence was more terrifying than any fit of rage. He took a handkerchief from his jacket pocket, slowly wiped the coffee stain, and then looked up at his assistant, Marcus, who stood paralyzed to the side. He spoke concisely, "Calculate the damages." Marcus started and quickly opened his notebook. His voice was monotone, but every figure he announced was like a stab to my heart. "Mr. President, this suit is from a custom tailor in Milan, valued at around $5,000. The cost of cleaning and restoring the mahogany table is estimated at $3,000, but the most important thing is this merger contract." Marcus hesitated for a moment and continued in a more serious tone. "Due to an internal network failure this morning, this is the only complete printed copy that hasn't been saved digitally. The delay in signing means we will have to compensate our partners for the waiting time and other unforeseen costs. The total damages are estimated at around $250,000. $250,000. The floor seemed to open up beneath my feet. My ears were ringing. I could no longer even hear the air conditioning. For someone like me, who lived from one day to the next, saving every penny from scooter deliveries, that figure was an unimaginable fortune. Even if I sold my blood and my organs, I wouldn't know where to get such a huge sum. I began to tremble, my face drained of blood, and I stammered, I'm sorry. I really didn't mean for it to happen. My children are small. They don't know what they're doing." Alexander looked at me with the same coldness one would look at an annoying creature that has just ruined a perfect workday. He didn't care about my pleas, nor was he moved by the two huddled children. He turned away, and his indifferent voice echoed. "Call the police. Trespassing. Destruction of property. Let the law handle it." "No!" I screamed, running towards him and kneeling to grab the hem of his pants. "Please, don't call the police. I'm begging you. I'll do anything to compensate you. Don't put me in jail. My children can't live without their mother." Alexander tried to push me away, but suddenly his expression changed. He clutched his stomach tightly, bending over slightly, his forehead beaded with cold sweat. His chronic stomach pain had returned, intense and brutal, as if it wanted to tear him apart from the inside. He hadn't eaten anything all day. He had only drunk black coffee to stay awake during the meeting, and now his stomach was rebelling with fury. Marcus, alarmed, supported him. "President, the pain again. I'll go get your medicine." "There's no time," Alexander groaned, his breath ragged and his face pale with pain. Seeing the scene, I suddenly remembered the familiar scent I had noticed on him earlier. It was the smell of expensive cologne and dark tobacco, the scent that had haunted me for 5 years, that of the man from that fateful, rainy night. Instinct told me what I had to do. I quickly rummaged through the insulated bag I was carrying and pulled out a container of chicken and rice soup that was still warm. I have this," I said quickly, my voice trembling but determined. "It's a chicken and rice soup. I made it for my lunch. Eat a little. It will ease the pain." Alexander frowned, looking at the modest plastic container with a mixture of suspicion and disgust. He was extremely selective about food and obsessively clean. How could he eat something from the street of unknown origin? He tried to refuse, but another stomach spasm prevented him from speaking. I didn't wait for his consent and quickly opened the lid. The gentle aroma of homemade broth, mixed with the chicken and rice, filled the air. I filled a small spoon and brought it to his mouth, speaking almost as if giving an order. "Eat. With that pain, what's with all the pride? The rice is soft and the broth will coat your stomach lining. It will soothe it instantly." Perhaps because of the intense pain, or because that aroma had a strange power of attraction, Alexander hesitated for a second and then opened his mouth. The smooth, comforting taste of the soup slid down his throat, spreading a calming warmth through his cramped stomach. Alexander's pupils dilated. Why did this taste feel so incredibly familiar? It was exactly the same as the soup from that mysterious woman, the one who had saved him from a drunken stupor and the effects of a drug, the one who had made him a hangover soup in the middle of the night. For 5 years, he had searched for that taste in the most luxurious restaurants, but he had never found it. He stared at me, an inquisitive look that seemed to want to read my soul. I lowered my head, my heart pounding 1,000 miles an hour, afraid he would discover something. But he said nothing. He simply took the spoon and ate all the soup. When the container was empty, Alexander's face regained some color. He straightened up, adjusted his jacket, and his usual air of coldness and authority returned. He looked at me, and then at the damage report Marcus was holding. Instead of ordering my arrest, he went to his desk, took a blank sheet of paper, and quickly wrote a few lines. "Sign here." He threw the paper at me. I caught it, and my trembling hands read its contents. It wasn't a confession of guilt, but a strange employment contract. "You will work as my personal cook and housekeeper to pay off the debt. Duration, 6 months. Room and board for you and your 2 children included. Your salary will be deducted from the $250,000 debt. If you work well, the debt may be forgiven sooner. If you try to escape, I will make sure you end up in jail." I looked up at him, then at my 2 huddled, frightened children. I had no other choice. Outside, debt, hunger, and the risk of prison awaited me. Here, at least my children would have a roof over their heads and food. I bit my lip, took the pen, and scrawled my name, Amelia, at the bottom of the page. Alexander gave a half smile, a calculated gesture. "Good. Marcus, take them to the villa. She starts work tomorrow." The luxury car took us out of the bustling city center and headed towards the outskirts to an exclusive gated community of multi-million-dollar mansions. The sterling villa appeared behind an imposing iron gate, as large and splendid as a fairy tale castle, but with an air of coldness and solitude that chilled the blood. The housekeeper led us to the staff room, located in a secluded corner of the first floor, next to the kitchen and laundry room. Although small compared to the rest of the mansion, it was clean and much more spacious than the damp apartment where we had lived. It had a sturdy oak bunk bed and a small table with chairs. I sighed with relief. At least this winter, my children wouldn't have to endure the wind seeping through the cracks of a rotten window. "Mom, this house is really big, but it's cold, isn't it?" Noah whispered, tightly gripping the edge of my shirt. I stroked his head, but before I could answer, a shrill voice echoed from the stairs. "Well, what is this? Since when is my house a refugee camp?" I turned around, startled. At the top of the spiral staircase stood a young woman dressed in a tight designer dress, laden with luxury shopping bags. It was Isabella Prescott, the one who was once like a sister to me and who had taken everything from me. And now, ironically, she was Alexander's unofficial fiancée. Isabella looked me over with narrowed eyes and then let out a shrill laugh, a sound as sharp as breaking glass. Well, if it isn't my dear Amelia, the fallen princess of the Van Doren family. How did you end up like this? Working as a maid to pay off debts. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. I lowered my head, trying to swallow the rage that was choking me, and answered in a whisper, "Miss Prescott, I've come to work. Isabella came down the stairs and circled me as if inspecting cheap merchandise. She glanced at my children, lingering a bit longer on Leo, seeming momentarily uneasy at his features, but she quickly regained her air of superiority and threw the designer bags onto the sofa. Very well, if you're the maid, you know what to do. All these clothes are high-end silk. They can't be machine-washed. Take them and hand-wash them right now, and remember to use a special detergent. If you damage a single thread, you couldn't pay for it even if you sold yourself whole. But I just arrived. I haven't even had time to settle the children in. I hesitated. Settle what? Isabella glared at me, her voice a hiss. You're a maid here, not a guest. If you want a roof for those two burdens, you'd better do your job. Alexander hates lazy people. Leo, hiding behind me, stared intently at Isabella. His dark eyes were cold, mature, and held a suppressed anger identical to Alexander's when he was angry. Isabella met that gaze, and for a moment she flinched and took a step back, muttering, "What's that little brat staring at me for?" I quickly pulled Leo towards me, protecting him. I knew my place now. I owed Alexander money, and I needed this place for my children to live. The pride of the well-bred young woman I once was no longer served me. I swallowed my tears, lowered my head, and accepted Isabella's mountain of clothes. Yes, I'll wash them right now. Isabella lifted her chin triumphantly. She turned to go up the stairs, but not before throwing one last barb. Some people are just born to serve. No matter how hard you try to climb, you always end up in the same place. Darkness fell over the mansion. Sitting in the laundry room, facing a pile of clothes, the cold water seeped into my bones. Outside, the wind whistled through the window cracks like a lament. My first night at the Sterling Villa was spent in humiliation and anxiety. I didn't know how many more storms awaited my children and me in the days to come. First thing in the morning, I was already at the market, choosing the freshest ingredients. My job was not only to clean, but, more importantly, to take care of the president's delicate stomach. I knew Alexander was tired of sophisticated but bland European cuisine, of business dinners filled with alcohol, and of soulless delicacies. What he needed, and the only thing I could offer with confidence, was the taste of home. As evening fell, the huge kitchen of the Sterling Villa came to life. Ignoring the modern ovens and induction cooktops, I took out the old clay pot I had brought with me. The sound of the knife chopping and the sizzle of oil broke the usual silence of the house. Today, I was preparing a classic pot roast and baked cod. Two simple, traditional dishes full of the flavor of an American home that anyone far away would miss. The aroma of sautéed vegetables, savory herbs, and fresh fish created a delicious fragrance that escaped the kitchen and spread through the cold, spacious living room. Around 8 p.m., a gleaming black Mercedes pulled up in front of the house. Alexander got out of the car, the weariness of a day of corporate battles etched on his face. He loosened his tie and entered, prepared to face the usual sense of emptiness. But as soon as he opened the door, his steps faltered. A warm, welcoming aroma enveloped him. It wasn't that of an expensive air freshener, but of a home-cooked meal. His stomach, which was beginning to ache, suddenly calmed, replaced by a sharp pang of hunger. He walked to the dining room. On the table, dinner was served, carefully covered. A steaming plate of pot roast, a platter of golden fish, a fresh salad, and a bowl of marinated olives. He sat down and picked up his utensils. The first bite of pot roast was an explosion of flavor in his mouth, an intense, comforting taste that reminded him of his childhood. The fish, tender and juicy, erased the bitterness of alcohol from his meetings. Alexander ate 3 servings. For the first time in years, he felt full, not just physically, but also in his soul. After dinner, he went up to his office and turned on the security camera monitor. His distrustful nature made him want to control everything, especially with new people in the house. On the black and white screen, he saw a scene in the small staff room. Amelia was sitting on the floor, shelling peas. The 2 children were beside her, watching their mother attentively. "These are peas, my loves. We have to take them out of the pod. See?" Amelia's soft voice came through the speaker. "Mom, is this a pea too?" Noah asked, holding up a pod with his wide eyes. "That's right, Noah. You're so smart. Throw it in the trash, please. And you, Leo, put the peas we've already shelled in this bowl." Alexander watched the screen intently. He saw Leo working diligently, with a seriousness identical to his own when he was focused. He saw Noah laugh out loud when his mother praised him. He saw Amelia working while tenderly wiping the sweat from her children's foreheads. A scene of astonishing peace, something that he, despite his billion-dollar fortune, had never had. He turned off the monitor, leaned back in his armchair, and massaged his temples. A strange feeling began to grow inside him, a mixture of curiosity and an undefined longing for the warmth of a home he had rejected for so long. The weekend dawned sunny. Alexander didn't go to the office but stayed in his study working. I took advantage of the children playing quietly to go out to the garden to water the plants. The villa's garden was full of imported rose bushes, rare varieties that, they said, Isabella had insisted on planting to add a touch of distinction. Leo and Noah were playing tag nearby. Their crystal-clear laughter echoed in the garden. Noah saw a velvety red rose, as large as a bowl. Curious, he ran to smell it, bringing his small nose close to the petals. At that very moment, Isabella entered the garden, driving her red convertible. As she got out of the car and saw Noah next to her precious rose bush, she became enraged. A malicious idea crossed her mind. She looked around and, seeing no one, lunged at the flower, ripped it off, crushed it in her hand, and threw it on the ground. "Ah, what have you done, you little demon?" Isabella screamed in a shrill voice. I was watering in a distant corner, and upon hearing the scream, I dropped the hose and ran over. The scene left me frozen, the rose bush destroyed, the red petals scattered at Noah's feet. The boy was as pale as paper, trembling, not understanding what was happening. Miss, it wasn't me," Noah stammered, his eyes full of tears. "And you deny it?" Isabella approached, pointing her finger at him. "I just saw you tear off my flower. Do you know how much this rosebush costs? Your mother couldn't afford a single petal working her whole life. You ill-mannered bastard. Like mother, like son." Leo, who was playing nearby, seeing his brother being insulted, shot out like an arrow. Without a word, he lowered his head and charged with all his might into Isabella's stomach. "Don't insult my brother," Leo shouted, his face red with anger. The unexpected blow made Isabella lose her balance. Staggering backward, she tripped over the hose I had left on the lawn. Splash! Isabella fell backward, landing right in a mud puddle at the foot of a tree. Her impeccable white dress was stained brown in a second. Mud splattered on her face and hair. In that moment, she looked like a wet hen. "Ah!" Isabella shrieked, as if she were being murdered. "You little devils! I'm going to kill you!" She struggled to her feet, her eyes bloodshot. She raised her hand, ready to slap Noah. Terrified, I ran and stood between them, protecting my son with my body. "Stop!" I shouted. But before Isabella's hand could reach me, the roar of an engine sounded. Alexander's car came out of the garage and stopped abruptly on the path. The door opened, and Alexander got out with an impassive face, narrowing his eyes at the chaotic scene. Upon seeing Alexander, Isabella instantly changed her expression of fury, covered her face, and fell to the ground, sobbing as if she were the most miserable victim in the world. "Oh, Alexander, look what they've done to me," she whimpered. "They ganged up on me. That little brat pushed me, and his mother just stood there laughing. You have to do something." I stood there, hugging my 2 trembling children, my heart pounding. He would believe her. He would throw us out onto the street that very instant. I looked up at him, expecting a cruel sentence. A gust of cold wind swept through the yard, bringing the first chill of winter. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the ice I felt in my heart when I saw Noah's little hand, swollen and red with bleeding scratches. Isabella was still on the ground, covered in mud, but she continued her theater of tears and laments. Her beautiful mouth twisted to spit venomous words, blaming Noah for destroying the plant, Leo for pushing her, and me for indulging my children. Alexander remained motionless like a mountain. His face was a mask of coldness, expressing no emotion, which terrified me even more. I held my children, prepared to receive the insults, even to be thrown out of the house that very night. Seeing Alexander's silence, Isabella grew bolder. She struggled to her feet and pointed at me. "Alexander, look at them. Because you pity them, they think they own the house. This rosebush is imported. It took me a month to get it, and that brat destroyed it without mercy. When I said something to him, his brother lunged at me. If you don't establish order, they'll end up walking all over you." I swallowed my tears and lifted my head to explain, but before I could open my mouth, Alexander moved. He didn't look at Isabella's muddy dress or the precious destroyed rosebush. He walked directly to me and knelt in front of Noah. "Give me your hand," he said concisely. His voice was deep, but it didn't sound angry. Noah, scared, hid his hand and took refuge behind me. Leo stood between him and his brother, looking at Alexander with suspicion. "What are you going to do to my brother?" Alexander didn't answer. Patiently, he extended his hand and took Noah's small, trembling hand. He examined it carefully, observing the bleeding scratches the rose thorns had made. Then he looked up and directly into Isabella's eyes. His gaze was as sharp as a razor, and she flinched. "Does your hand hurt, little one?" he asked Noah. His voice had softened in a surprising way. Noah nodded, stunned, tears still glistening on his eyelashes. "Yes, it hurts." Alexander stood up, took a handkerchief from his pocket, and carefully wiped the mud from the boy's hand. His gesture was meticulous and gentle, as if he were handling a treasure. When he finished, he turned to Isabella, who was speechless with surprise. "What were you saying?" Alexander asked. His voice was calm but held a veiled threat. "I was saying the boy tore off my flower. Yes, that's right." "I saw it with my own eyes," Isabella stammered, trying to cling to her lie. "And did you also see that his hand is torn up by the thorns?" Alexander interrupted, his voice hardening. "A rosebush, no matter how expensive, is trash compared to a person's skin. In this house, children are loved, not hit, and certainly not insulted with such vulgar words." Isabella was left without an argument. Her face went from red to pale white. She couldn't believe Alexander was defending a strange child instead of her, his well-born fiancé. But, can't you see he pushed me and stained all my clothes?" Isabella protested indignantly. "If you hadn't tried to hit him, his brother wouldn't have pushed you," Alexander sentenced, ending any hope of her act working. "Go change and reflect on your behavior. And one more thing. I don't want to hear the words bastard or illegitimate child in this house again. Ever. It's a ban." Isabella, furious, kicked the ground, shot me a murderous look, and left, grumbling. When her figure disappeared behind the large wooden door, peace returned to the garden. I sighed in relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Alexander turned to look at me. Our gazes met for a brief moment. There was no contempt or pity, just a hint of incomprehensible reflection. "Take the boy inside to treat his wound. There's rubbing alcohol and bandages in the first aid kit in the living room." With that, he turned and walked away. His tall figure cast a long shadow on the tiles. I followed that back with my eyes. For the first time in 5 years of constant struggle, I felt protected, even if it was just a fragile glimmer of warmth from a strange, yet incredibly familiar man. The night was deep and silent. The ticking of the clock in the mansion's quietude emphasized the loneliness. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep, partly because of Noah's wound and partly because of the turmoil I felt after the afternoon's events. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise coming from the study on the second floor. Heavy footsteps, the clash of objects, and a muffled groan. My instinct told me something was wrong. I put on a thin robe and went upstairs stealthily. The study door was ajar, and a yellow light filtered into the hallway. I peeked in and saw Alexander slumped over his desk, clutching his stomach with both hands, his face pale and drenched in sweat. It was another stomach pain attack. The pressure from work and irregular meals were likely torturing him again. Without hesitation, I ran to the kitchen. There was still some rice and fresh mint in the refrigerator that I carefully stored. It was my mother's secret remedy for stomach aches and colds. I quickly washed the rice and started making a porridge. The soft aroma of the rice, mixed with the freshness of the mint, spread through the kitchen, dissipating the night's chill. 30 minutes later, I went up to the study with a bowl of hot porridge. I knocked gently on the door. "Mr. Sterling, may I come in?" "Come in." His voice sounded hoarse and weak. I entered. and placed the bowl on the table in front of him. "Eat some porridge to settle your stomach. I put mint in it. It's very good for digestion." Alexander looked up at the steaming bowl. The familiar aroma invaded him, awakening memories dormant for 5 years. That night, amidst the confusion of alcohol and the pain of betrayal, it was this very aroma that had saved him. The smooth taste of rice, the freshness of mint, and the gentleness of that woman. He picked up the spoon and took a small taste. His palate exploded. There was no doubt. It was this taste. He put the spoon down and stared at me, his gaze so penetrating it seemed to want to pierce through me. "Who taught you how to make this?" I jumped, my heart racing. I knew he suspected something. If I told him the truth, my identity as the fallen daughter of the Van Doren family would be revealed, and the dark past of 5 years ago would come to light again. I couldn't let that happen. At least not now, when my children's lives and mine were so precarious. I lowered my gaze, trying to keep my voice calm, though my hands trembled uncontrollably. I learned it online. I read that mint was good for digestion, so I tried making it. You don't like it? Alexander was silent for a long time, his eyes never leaving my face. He seemed to be weighing, scrutinizing every small expression on this humble employee's face. There were too many coincidences. The scent of my clothes in the boardroom, the taste of today's soup, and the strange familiarity I felt whenever I was near him. But finally, he sighed as if accepting my explanation. Perhaps he couldn't believe that a poor, simple woman like me could have any connection to that fateful night. "It's nothing," he said, his voice returning to its usual coldness. "It's very good. Thank you." I sighed in relief and asked for permission to leave. When the door closed behind me, I leaned against the wall and slid to the floor, my back soaked in cold sweat. I knew I had just narrowly escaped, but Alexander's inquisitive gaze still haunted me. How much longer could I keep my secret hidden? In the middle of the night, a storm broke out. Thunder rumbled, tearing through the silence. I was half asleep when I heard Leo moaning beside me. I touched his forehead. It was burning like a coal. The child was having a seizure. His eyes rolled back, and he was foaming at the mouth. "Leo! Honey! Leo!" I screamed, shaking him desperately, but he didn't react. The high fever had made him lose consciousness. Terrified, I picked him up. I wrapped him in a blanket and ran out. Noah also woke up from my screams and, frightened, clung to my leg, crying. With Leo in my arms and pulling Noah along, I ran to the living room. I tried to call a cab, but it was useless. With the storm raging, all the companies were busy or had no cars available. I looked at my son, who was starting to turn blue, and felt an unbearable pain. Tears streamed down my cheeks. Was fate going to be so cruel as to take my son from me tonight? Just as I was about to give up and run out into the rain towards the hospital, the staircase light turned on. Alexander appeared, still in silk pajamas, his hair slightly disheveled, but his eyes wide awake. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed at my state. "Mr. Sterling, save my son, please," I sobbed, my voice broken. "He has a very high fever and is having a seizure. I can't get a car." Without asking any more questions, he ran down the stairs and took Leo from my arms. "To the car, quick." He ran with Leo towards the garage. With Noah in hand, I stumbled after him. The car sped into the rainy night, cutting through the curtain of water. Alexander drove with one hand, while with the other, he occasionally touched Leo's forehead. His face was tense, his brow furrowed. When we arrived at the hospital, he bolted out with Leo in his arms towards the emergency room, shouting for a doctor. Seeing his tall, strong figure protecting my son, a mixture of gratitude and bitterness washed over me. If only he knew it was his own blood. Leo was admitted to the emergency room. I collapsed into a chair in the hallway, trembling with cold and fear. Noah snuggled into my lap, crying inconsolably. Alexander stood leaning against the opposite wall, his gaze fixed on the closed emergency room door. A short while later, a nurse came out and informed us that Leo was out of danger. They were giving him an IV to bring down the fever. I breathed a sigh of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. "The patient's family member. Come do the admission paperwork," the nurse said. I stood up awkwardly and searched for my wallet in my pocket, but I realized that in my haste, I hadn't brought any money. Shame washed over me. "I'll take care of it," Alexander said, approaching and handing his credit card to the nurse. "Put him in the best room on the private floor." "Are you the child's father?" the nurse asked, as she filled out the form. Alexander hesitated for a second and then nodded. "Yes, I am his father." That simple phrase made my heart skip a beat. His father. How natural and how painful those two sacred words sounded from his lips. While I went in to take care of Leo, Alexander went out to buy water and something for Noah to eat. Watching him awkwardly try to get Noah to eat, wiping away his tears, softened my heart. Perhaps behind the cold, ruthless facade of the empire's president, there was still a man who longed for the warmth of a family, who longed to be a father. But I didn't know that at that moment, Marcus, Alexander's assistant, had discreetly approached the doctor to ask for a copy of Leo's medical records. The child's rare blood type, Rh negative, had caught the astute assistant's attention, opening a huge question about the twins' true identity. Today was the anniversary of Alexander's grandfather's passing, an important event for the Sterling clan. The entire family gathered at the family estate. The atmosphere was solemn but also charged with the gunpowder of internal power struggles for control of the company. Alexander asked me to bring the children, with the excuse that he needed someone to look after them while he attended to the guests. But I suspected he wanted to use their presence to provoke the other relatives who coveted his position. I dressed Leo and Noah in two small, custom-made suits that Alexander had ordered for them. They looked like two miniature princes, especially Leo, who looked more like Alexander every day, from his straight nose to his deep eyes. Our arrival immediately drew everyone's attention. Inquisitive glances and whispers spread like a swarm of bees. "Whose children are those? They look so much like Alexander. They say they belong to the new housekeeper." Housekeeper, but she's gorgeous. Or so it seems. Isabella appeared in the crowd, dazzling in a red evening gown. She looked at me triumphantly, holding a carefully sealed envelope. I had a bad feeling. When everyone was seated at the table, Isabella suddenly stood up, took a microphone, and said loudly, "Dear uncles, cousins, family, today on Grandpa's anniversary, I have a very special gift for Alexander and for all of you. A truth that has been hidden from us." The whole room fell silent. Isabella looked at me, and her smile became even more malicious. She opened the envelope, took out a paper, and held it up for everyone to see. "This is the result of a DNA test between Alexander and these two children. I secretly took a sample of his hair to end the rumors, and the result is—" She paused for suspense and then pronounced each syllable forcefully. "There is no kinship." A murmur of astonishment swept through the room. Isabella continued her attack, pointing directly at me. "This woman, this so-called Amelia, is actually a professional con artist. She knows she had children with some man who looks like Alexander, so she has staged this whole act to get close to him, to get money from him, and to pass off her children as his. She wants to turn the noble blood of the Sterling family into the laughingstock of the world." Isabella's accusations were like poisoned arrows. All the looks of contempt and disgust were fixed on me and my children. I was paralyzed, trembling, wanting to scream that it was all a lie, but my throat was tight. That test result, why did it say there was no kinship? Had I been mistaken about the man that night? Or had she forged the result? Leo squeezed my hand. His eyes burned with rage as he looked at Isabella. Noah, scared, hid in my lap. I felt more alone and vulnerable than ever, surrounded by hungry wolves. I looked at Alexander, searching for a glimmer of hope. He sat with an impassive face, his eyes fixed on the paper Isabella held. The test report in Isabella's hands was like a death sentence that left my children and me with no way out. The murmurs grew louder, like needles pricking my skin. I hugged Noah tightly, feeling his heart race. Leo stood in front of me, his eyes blazing with anger, his fists clenched. Isabella looked at me with a triumphant smile that widened even more. She approached and shoved the paper in my face, her voice dripping with provocation. "Well, do you have anything to say? How long do you plan to deceive Alexander and the entire Sterling family?" I wanted to scream, to say it was all a lie, but a lump in my throat stopped me. I looked at Alexander, hoping to find a hint of trust in him, but he remained motionless, his face impassive, showing no emotion. Suddenly, Alexander stood up. He walked slowly towards Isabella with a look so cold and sharp that her smile froze. He snatched the paper from her hands, glanced at it, and gave a contemptuous smile. A DNA test. Whose hair did you take to stage this little show? I took the boy's hair, Isabella stammered. Her earlier confidence had vanished before Alexander's imposing presence. Are you sure it was his hair? Or was it the hair of some other child you found on the street? Alexander pressed, his voice deep but full of power. Isabella turned pale, unable to answer. Alexander didn't wait for her explanation. He tore the paper in half. The sound of ripping paper echoed in the deathly silence, making everyone jump. He continued to tear the paper into pieces and threw them into the air like confetti. Alexander, what are you doing? That was the proof, Isabella shouted, trying to stop him, but his look paralyzed her. Proof! Alexander scoffed. To me, these useless papers have no value. I trust my gut more than your little games. They are my guests. I brought them here. Whoever insults them is insulting me, Alexander Sterling. He turned to the relatives, who were looking at him in astonishment, and his voice resonated firmly. From now on, if anyone dares to gossip or insult Amelia and her children, don't expect me to respect blood ties. With that, he approached me. He bent down, picked up Noah, and then took Leo's hand. Let's go. It's too noisy here. It's not good for the children. I looked at him, stunned, as tears welled up. In that moment, I felt he had rescued me from an abyss. His broad back, his warm hand had protected us from the storm of public opinion. I didn't know if he did it because he trusted me or just to protect his honor. But at that moment, it no longer mattered. What mattered was that my children were safe. We left the room, leaving behind a petrified Isabella, her face contorted with rage, and a crowd of relatives who looked at us with a mixture of awe and fear. The car pulled away from the family estate, leaving behind the noise and malice. The silence inside was so deep you could hear the steady breathing of the children. Noah had fallen asleep on Alexander's shoulder, and Leo was looking out the window, as thoughtful as a miniature old man. I was in the passenger seat, glancing sideways at Alexander. He still had his usual cold expression, but his gaze had softened. He drove with one hand, while with the other he held Noah to keep him from falling in the curves. That small gesture filled me with a strange warmth. Why? Why did you do that? I asked in a whisper, breaking the tense silence. Weren't you worried that the test result was real? Alexander didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the road, his voice calm. I don't care if that paper was real or fake. I know exactly what Isabella is like. She's capable of anything to get what she wants, even forging documents or hurting others. And as for you, he paused and turned to look at me. His deep eyes seemed to want to read my soul. I trust my intuition. A mother who is willing to sacrifice everything for her children like you is not a calculating and deceitful person. My heart skipped a beat. He believed me. Amidst so many doubts and accusations, he had chosen to believe me. A wave of emotion rose in my throat, making my nose tingle. Thank you, I said, my voice trembling. Thank you for protecting my children. Alexander said nothing, just nodded slightly. He parked in front of a small neighborhood diner. It's late. Let's get something to eat. The children must be hungry. The place was almost empty, with a few plastic tables and chairs. We ordered bowls of hot tomato soup. Alexander meticulously wiped the plates and cutlery before giving them to Leo and Noah. He put the best pieces of bread and ham in their bowls before starting to eat himself. Seeing that scene, I felt a pang in my heart. If only we were a real family, if there were no misunderstandings, no differences in status, how complete this happiness would be. Suddenly, Leo, who was eating, looked up and stared at Alexander. Mr. Sterling, do you like tomato soup? Alexander looked at him, surprised, and then smiled. Of course. Why do you ask? Because you eat it just like I do, Leo said with complete naturalness. My mom says that people who really like tomato soup are very sentimental. I almost choked. Where did this child get such adult phrases? Alexander laughed, a rare laugh for him that dispelled his usual coldness. He ruffled Leo's hair. Oh, really? Well then, you and I are alike. In that instant, I felt the wall of ice surrounding my heart begin to melt. Maybe I should open up a little more, give myself and my children a chance to be happy, even if just for a moment. From that day on, our relationship seemed to change slightly. Alexander started coming home earlier, spending time with the children. He even enrolled Leo and Noah in a prestigious international preschool, a place I could only have dreamed of. One day, Noah came home from school with a sad face, threw his old backpack on the sofa, and went into his room, covering himself with a blanket up to his head. Worried, I went to see what was wrong. After a while, he finally came out with red eyes. "Mom, I don't want to go to school anymore." "What's wrong, honey?" I asked sadly. "Did another child bother you?" "No." Noah shook his head, sniffling. "But the other kids laugh at my backpack. They say it's ugly. For poor people. They all have really nice superhero and princess backpacks. Buy me a new one, Mom." I looked at his worn-out backpack and felt a lump in my throat. It was a second-hand backpack I had bought for him at a flea market, and it had been with him for 2 years. I knew he felt bad, but I was still in debt. My salary as a housekeeper barely covered the basics. Where was I going to get money for an expensive backpack? "Noah, my love, I'm so sorry." I hugged him, holding back tears. "Right now, Mommy doesn't have money to buy you a new one. But remember one thing, a person's value isn't in the backpack they carry or the clothes they wear. It's here." I placed my hand on his chest, where his heart was beating strongly. "It's in having a good heart, in being polite and respectful. This backpack is old, but it's full of the love Mommy has for you. Don't be sad about what others say, okay?" Noah nodded, but his face still reflected his disappointment. That night, while I was cleaning the kitchen, Alexander called me to his study. When I entered, I saw him sitting on the floor, surrounded by a needle, thread, pieces of fabric, and Noah's old backpack. "Sir, what are you doing?" I asked, surprised. "Fixing Noah's backpack," he answered naturally, without stopping his sewing. "He likes superheroes, right? I'm going to embroider a shield over the tear." I stood there, frozen, unable to believe what I was seeing. The president of a multi-billion-dollar empire sitting on the floor, sewing his housekeeper's son's backpack. "Sir, you don't have to do that. I'll buy him a new one," I stammered. "It's not necessary," he interrupted. "You were right. Value isn't in material things, but children need their joys too. I want to teach him that old things can be beautiful and unique if we take care of them and are creative." He looked up at me. His gaze was strangely warm. Besides, I wanted to do something for him. It hurts me to see him sad. The next morning, Noah shouted with joy when he saw his backpack. The tier was covered by a fun embroidery of a superhero shield, and next to it, his name was carefully stitched. "Wow, it's so pretty, Mom! My backpack is unique!" Noah jumped up and hugged Alexander. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. You're an artist." Alexander blushed and picked him up. Seeing the radiant smiles of the two, one big and one small, my heart filled with happiness. Maybe happiness wasn't about luxurious and expensive things, but simply sincere gestures of affection and attention, like this. That weekend, Alexander announced we were all going to Six Flags. He said it was to study a possible tourism investment project, but seeing the excitement in Leo and Noah's eyes, I knew it was just an excuse to take the children to have fun. The huge park was practically empty. Only a few employees were visible. It turned out Alexander had booked the entire park for us. "Wow, it's so big!" "So cool!" Noah shouted, running from one place to another. Leo, though calmer, also had sparkling eyes. He grabbed Alexander's hand and pointed to the roller coaster. "Mr. Sterling, can we?" Alexander looked at the dizzying curves of the ride, and his face paled slightly. I knew he had a bit of vertigo, but seeing Leo's expectant face, he took a deep breath and nodded. "Of course. Let's go." A man of his word. I laughed. I would have never imagined the cold president could have such a childish side. We rode all the rides, the roller coaster, the swinging chairs, the haunted house. Laughter and screams echoed throughout the park. At noon, we sat down for ice cream. Alexander's white shirt was stained with chocolate from Noah's carelessness. Instead of getting angry, he laughed, cleaned himself up as best he could with a napkin, and continued playing with the children. He even put on a ridiculous pair of Mickey Mouse ears that Noah made him buy. "Mom, a picture!" Noah exclaimed. I took out my phone and took a photo of the four of us. In it, Leo and Noah were smiling from ear to ear, and Alexander had his arm around me with a radiant smile rarely seen on his face. Looking at the photo, I felt a lump in my throat. We looked like a happy family, the family I had always dreamed of. But the joy was short-lived. I didn't know that in a secluded corner, a paparazzi's lens was aimed at us, capturing every one of those intimate moments. A big storm was brewing, threatening to sweep away the fragile happiness I had just found. The sunset painted the sky red, reflecting on the park's lake as if it were liquid gold. The soft light of the day's end caressed the skin. Alexander suggested we ride the Ferris wheel to see the city from above, an experience Leo and Noah had never had. The Ferris wheel cabin rose slowly, leaving the hustle and bustle behind. The space inside was small but cozy. We sat facing each other. Noah pressed his nose against the glass, his eyes wide as he watched the houses and streets turn into toy models. He kept shouting excitedly, "Mom, look, the cars are as small as ants." I smiled at my son and then glanced at Alexander. He was sitting relaxed, his gaze lost on the horizon, his face strangely at peace. Perhaps these moments were a rare respite in his life of struggles and calculations. Leo, who had been silent, suddenly turned and stared at Alexander. His dark eyes shone with a seriousness surprising for his age. He cleared his throat and asked a question that left the air in the cabin suspended. "Mr. Sterling, do you like my mom?" My son's unexpected question startled me, and I turned as red as a tomato. I tried to interrupt him. "Leo, what are you saying? Mr. Sterling is our boss. He's helped us a lot. You can't ask such questions." But Alexander motioned for me to be quiet. He turned to Leo. His look was neither mocking nor uncomfortable, but of a sincerity rare in him. He looked deep into the boy's eyes and answered slowly, "Yes, I like your mom very much." My heart was pounding. Although I had sensed his feelings from his recent gestures of attention, hearing him admit it so directly left me breathless. A man as arrogant and cold as him, admitting he liked a poor, single mother like me. Leo was not surprised by Alexander's answer. He nodded as if it were something he already knew and continued with amazing calmness. "Then, are you going to marry my mom?" This time it was Alexander who laughed. He looked at the boy with a mixture of amusement and admiration. He didn't answer immediately, but turned to look at me. His gaze was as tender and warm as the autumn sun, and I had to look down to hide my blush. "I would love to," Alexander said, his voice deep and warm. "But first, I would have to know if your mom and you two agree. If I say yes, would you give me permission to marry her?" Leo thought for a moment, furrowing his small eyebrows as if in deep reflection. Then he looked up, met Alexander's eyes, and said, articulating each word, "If you promise you'll never make my mom cry, that you'll never treat her badly, and that you'll buy Noah lots of candy, then I'll think about it." Alexander burst out laughing and ruffled his hair. "All right. It's a deal. You have my word as a gentleman." The atmosphere in the cabin became warm and filled with laughter. But we didn't know that just as the Ferris wheel reached its highest point, from a hidden corner below, a camera's telephoto lens had captured the moment. Alexander and I looked at each other, smiling with the children by our side. The sound of the shutter clicked again and again, recording the images that would soon become the center of a fierce media storm. A professional photographer, hired by Isabella at an exorbitant price, had been lurking all day. He smiled smugly as he reviewed the photos. The headline for tomorrow's article was already clear in his mind. The Sterling Group president and his alleged secret son. The truth about the Cinderella nanny. The next morning, I woke up in a great mood, still cherishing the memory of the previous day. I prepared breakfast for the three of them, humming to myself. But my joy vanished when Marcus rushed into the kitchen, pale and holding a tablet. "Amelia, we have a very serious problem. Look at this." I dried my hands on my apron and took the tablet. The first thing I saw was a bright red headline on the front page of a famous news website. "Gold-digging nanny uses illegitimate children to trap tycoon Sterling. The harsh truth behind the modern Cinderella story." Below it was a series of stolen photos from our day at the park. The angle of the photos made innocent gestures seem suspicious. Alexander holding Noah, Leo, and Alexander laughing together, and especially the moment we looked at each other on the Ferris wheel. Everything had been manipulated to tell a cheap, calculated love story. The article claimed I was a professional gold digger who used her nanny job to seduce her boss. It cited an anonymous source, whom I knew was Isabella, accusing me of having a shady past, of having 2 children with an unknown father, and of now trying to pass them off to Alexander to enter high society. To top it off, they had published an edited video of my argument with Isabella in the garden. In the video, Isabella's venomous words had been cut, leaving only the scene where I was yelling at her and Leo was pushing her. The reaction online was immediate. Thousands of malicious and hateful comments fell upon me and my children like a shower of bombs. What a shameless woman, using her kids to fish for a millionaire. She seems like a nice girl, but she's a viper, and she teaches her son to hit his elders. Poor fiancé, with a harpy like that getting in the way. My legs gave way, and the tablet almost fell from my hands. I felt a lump in my throat, and tears streamed down uncontrollably. Why? Why could people be so cruel? They knew nothing about me, nothing of the truth, yet they were willing to use the most hurtful words to trample on the honor of a mother and 2 innocent children. Alexander entered the kitchen, his face shadowed. He took the tablet from my hands and threw it on the table. The bang startled me. "Don't read anymore," he said, his voice cold but containing great tension. "Don't let that trash dirty your eyes." "But they're insulting my children. They're calling Leo and Noah bastards," I sobbed, collapsing to the floor and covering my face to cry. Alexander knelt beside me and put his arm around me. His hand squeezed my shoulder, giving me a little strength in the midst of the storm. "Calm down. I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you." But his words barely comforted me, because outside, at the villa's entrance, shouts and a great commotion began to be heard. The noise from outside grew louder and louder. I ran to the living room and looked out the window. A chaotic crowd had gathered in front of the gate. They carried signs with insults. "Gold digger out. Justice for the real fiancé. Expel the tramp and her pups." There were not only curious onlookers, but also radicals and TikTokers live streaming, pointing their cameras at the house as if they were cannons. They shouted, insulted, and demanded that I come out and face them. "Amelia, the tramp, come out here and show us that shameless face of yours. Get out of here." Suddenly, there was a loud crash. A large rock broke the living room window and fell to the floor, rolling to Noah's feet. Shattered glass flew everywhere. Noah screamed in terror and burst into tears, covering his head. Leo ran to hug him, but he was trembling too. "Mom, I'm scared. Noah's crying broke my soul." I ran and hugged them with all my might, protecting them with my body. The blood rushed to my head. Rage and pain were driving me crazy. They could insult me, humiliate me, but they had no right to harm my children. They were only 4 years old. What was their fault? Alexander was paralyzed for a second by the scene. Then, like a wounded, cornered beast, he exploded. He ran out and shouted at the cowering security guards, "Close the gate! Call the riot police right now. If anyone dares to throw another stone, I will make them regret it for the rest of their lives." He turned to us, huddled among the broken glass. His eyes were bloodshot. It was no longer the look of a cold president, but that of a husband and a father, furiously protecting his family. He picked up Noah and led Leo and me to an inner room. "Marcus," he shouted, "gather all the evidence, security cameras, articles, malicious comments. Find the ringleader of this mob. I want the Prescott family ruined in 3 days. I want Isabella and everyone behind this to pay a very high price." I had never seen Alexander so furious. His anger was like a consuming fire. He put Noah on the sofa, checked that he wasn't hurt, and then turned to hug me. "I'm sorry, Amelia," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It's my fault. I failed to protect you." I shook my head, my tears soaking his shirt. "No, it's not your fault. It's the cruelty of people. It's envy and greed that turn people into monsters." But at that moment, in the deepest darkness, I realized I was no longer alone. I had him, the man willing to stand up, to protect us from any storm. Alexander's study became a command center. Marcus and the company's communication team worked tirelessly. The clatter of keyboards and rapid, concise conversations filled the room. Alexander sat at the head of the table, his face serious, his eyes fixed on a large screen displaying a constant stream of data. "President, we've traced the IP of the first article," a technician reported. "It comes from an internet cafe near Miss Prescott's house. And the fake accounts that incited hatred in the comments are all controlled by a disreputable communication agency closely linked to the Prescott Group," Marcus added, placing a thick dossier on the table. "Here are the transfer statements from Miss Prescott's personal account to that agency. The description is Communication Services." Alexander leafed through the dossier, a cold smile playing on his lips. Isabella, did you think you could manipulate the truth with money? You underestimated technology and my patience." "Keep digging," he ordered. "I want to know everything about her past. 5 years ago, the night I was drugged at the hotel, where was she? What did she do?" Marcus nodded, and his fingers flew across the keyboard. He used data recovery software to access an old cloud account of Isabella's, an account she had forgotten but was still linked to her current phone number. After several tense hours, a folder with old photos and messages appeared. "I've got it," Marcus exclaimed. "President, this is a conversation between Miss Prescott and a close friend from the day after that night." Alexander leaned in to read the messages. "Friend, you won't believe my luck. Last night, I found Alexander's room key card in the hotel hallway. I snuck in and found him passed out. I staged a scene as if I had just saved him. In the morning, he bought the whole story and even promised to take responsibility for me. I'm going to be the queen of the ball." Alexander's hands clenched into fists, the veins standing out. So, he had been deceived all this time. The woman he thought he owed his gratitude to, the woman he planned to marry, was an imposter. And his true savior, the woman who had cared for him and made him that soup, had been ignored and despised by him. "There's more, President," Marcus said, his voice trembling with excitement. "I contacted the receptionist who was on duty that night at the hotel. He quit and moved back to his hometown, but he kept a copy of the security footage from his shift. Out of curiosity, I convinced him to send us the original file. A blurry black and white video appeared on the screen. The timestamp read 2 a.m. A petite woman was helping a drunk man, who was him, into the room. She stayed for about 30 minutes and then ran out, frightened. Almost an hour later, Isabella appeared, stealthily picked up the room key from the floor, and snuck inside. The whole truth was laid bare. There was no doubt. Amelia was the woman from that night, and Leo and Noah. Alexander closed his eyes. A hot tear rolled down his cheek. What had he done? He had let his wife and children suffer for 5 years while he cared for and pampered the person who had deceived him. Remorse flooded him like a tsunami, drowning him in pain. "Prepare a press conference." He opened his eyes, his voice hoarse but firm. "I want the whole world to know the truth. Tomorrow." The waiting room behind the auditorium was freezing, but my hands were sweating. I curled up on a velvet sofa, hugging my children as if seeking some warmth. On the other side of the heavy curtain, hundreds of cameras were pointed at the stage, and millions of eyes were following us live. They were expecting a show, to see the gold-digging nanny unmasked. Alexander walked onto the stage, imposing in his black suit. He carried no notes, only a terrifying calm. The auditorium, which had been a hive of noise, fell silent. I watched him on the large screen on the wall, my heart pounding. "I know you are all waiting for an explanation," Alexander began, his deep voice resonating through the speakers. "But today, I am not here to defend myself, but to demand justice for the woman I love." The room erupted in murmurs. He gestured, and the enormous LED screen behind him lit up not with business charts, but with a black and white video from 5 years ago. The video showed a hotel hallway. A drunk man stumbling was being helped by a petite young woman. The young woman wore an oversized hotel uniform, her hair tied back, and a worried but determined expression. It was me 5 years ago, naive and full of energy. I watched myself help him into the room. About 30 minutes later, I ran out, my hands on my chest, terrified. The hallway fell silent. Almost an hour later, another figure appeared. It was Isabella. She tiptoed, looked both ways, bent down to pick up the key card I had dropped, smiled smugly, and slipped inside. "This is the truth you wanted to know," Alexander said, pointing to the screen. His voice hardened. "The person who saved me that night, who stood by me in my worst moment, was Amelia. Isabella Prescott is just an opportunist, a thief who shamelessly stole another person's destiny." I covered my mouth, sobbing. Tears fell uncontrollably. 5 years of injustice, of contempt. They had finally been washed away. Alexander looked directly at the camera, his eyes blazing. "I declare that the Sterling Group is ending all collaboration with the Prescott Group. My lawyers are preparing a lawsuit against Isabella Prescott for fraud, identity theft, and defamation." Later, Marcus told me that Isabella was watching the live broadcast from her home. Enraged, she had thrown her glass of red wine at the television screen. The wine spilled on the floor like blood, heralding the collapse of her empire of lies. The media storm instantly changed direction. Those who insulted me yesterday now attacked Isabella and her family with twice the ferocity. Social media was flooded with apologies directed at me, but I no longer had the heart to read them. I only felt tired and a bitter sadness for the fickleness of people. The effect of Alexander's press conference was more devastating than any tsunami. The stocks of the Prescott family's company plummeted, entering a trading halt for 3 consecutive days. Business partners, fearing they would be tainted, withdrew their investments and canceled contracts. The banks that once rolled out the red carpet for them now demanded immediate repayment of debts. That night, the news reported that Isabella's father had been arrested for fraud and money laundering. The image of that once powerful man, now with his head bowed and hands cuffed, was chilling. I watched the television with Noah asleep in my lap. Leo was beside me, watching the screen in silence with a look of deep reflection. "Mom, is that man bad?" Leo asked quietly. I stroked his hair and sighed. "There's a law in this life, honey, called karma. You reap what you sow. He did things that were not right, and now he has to answer to justice." Isabella, from being a pampered princess, lost everything overnight. Her assets were seized, her bank accounts frozen. The high society friends who once fawned over her disappeared, and some even took to airing her dirty laundry to gain notoriety. Marcus told me Isabella had to hide in a miserable apartment on the outskirts to escape creditors and the press. She had gone mad, muttering curses against me and Alexander. Hatred had consumed her mind, turning her into a wounded, cornered beast, ready to attack at any moment. But at that time, I was not aware of the danger posed by someone who had nothing left to lose. I thought the storm had passed, that peace had returned to our home. I didn't know that an even crueler conspiracy was brewing in the dark, waiting for the moment to strike. When the media storm subsided, Alexander took us back to the villa. The house was still the same, but the cold atmosphere from before seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a warmth that could be felt in every corner. That night, after putting the children to bed, Alexander called me to the living room. He was sitting on the sofa, looking thoughtful. On the table was a dark brown envelope, very different from the flashy white one Isabella had shown at the party. "Sit down, Amelia." He indicated the spot next to him, his voice soft but tense. I sat down shyly, wringing my hands. Alexander picked up the envelope and handed it to me. "Open it. This is something that belongs to you and the children." With trembling hands, I took the envelope, broke the seal, and pulled out a document with the official seal of the country's most prestigious genetics center. The words danced before my eyes, but the final figure was unmistakable: 99.9%. Conclusion: Alexander Sterling and Leo Vega, Noah Vega, share a paternity link. Although I already knew the truth, seeing it confirmed on paper moved me deeply. Tears fell on the red seal, smudging it. The secret I had kept for 5 years had finally come to light. Suddenly, Alexander stood up, came in front of me, and to my astonishment, knelt on the cold marble floor. "Alexander, what are you doing?" I said, alarmed, trying to lift him. "Get up, please. You're the president of—" "No." He shook his head, taking my trembling hand in his. "Right now, I'm not the president. I'm just a terrible man, an irresponsible father who has let his wife and children suffer for 5 years." He looked at me, his eyes red and filled with deep regret. "Amelia, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for hurting you that night. I'm sorry for not recognizing you sooner. I'm sorry for all the rainy days you had to take the children to the hospital alone. I'm sorry for letting you suffer the public's humiliation." Each of his apologies was like warm water washing away years of pain and resentment. I burst into tears, a liberating cry. I didn't pull my hand away, letting him hold it, feeling the sincerity that trembled in his touch. "I know this apology comes too late," his voice broke, "but please give me a chance. Not to start over, but to make up for everything we lost. Let me be Leo and Noah's father. Let me be the man who protects you for the rest of your life." In that grand living room, under the soft light of the lamps, without flowers or diamond rings, just with a DNA test and a man kneeling in apology, I received the most sincere and moving proposal in the world. Although my heart was moved by Alexander's sincerity, my reason prevented me from accepting immediately. The scars of the past, the enormous difference in status, and a vague fear of the future held me back. Who was I? A single mother, with nothing. A woman who had fallen from grace. Was I worthy of entering that world of wealth and power? I withdrew my hand, dried my tears, and tried to calm myself. "Alexander, I appreciate your feelings, but this is too sudden for me. I need time." Alexander looked at me with a shadow of disappointment, but then nodded understandingly. He stood up and sat beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. "I understand," he said softly. "I won't pressure you. You've suffered too much. You need time to heal. I will wait. I will wait as long as it takes." From that day on, Alexander changed completely. He stopped using money or power to solve things. He started learning to be a real father and partner. From the smallest details, he, a man who had never done a household chore, now entered the kitchen at 5 a.m. to try to make me breakfast, even though it always ended up burnt or too salty. He gave up fancy parties to come home early and get on the floor to play Legos with Leo or patiently listen to Noah recount his adventures at daycare. One time, I saw him cutting Leo's nails. The boy, always restless, wouldn't stop moving. But Alexander did it with infinite patience, focused, his forehead beaded with sweat, more tense than when signing a multi-million-dollar contract. When he finished, he sighed in relief and showed me with a wide grin. "Look, Amelia, I did it, not a single cut." Seeing the childish smile on the face of that man over 30, my heart melted. I realized he wasn't just trying to win me over. He was trying to heal his own soul, to reconnect with the family values he had lost. I still kept my distance, calling him Mr. Sterling, sleeping in a separate room with the children. But every night, seeing the 3 of them together reading a bedtime story, I felt the wall I had built around myself crumble. Love wasn't about grand promises, but about constant presence, the daily effort to change for the other. The following days passed in a calm that presaged a storm. Isabella had disappeared. No one knew where she was. I thought she might have fled the country in fear, but I was wrong. Her silence was the countdown of a ticking time bomb. One Friday afternoon, I went to pick up the children from daycare. The sky was covered in dark clouds. The school gate was a chaos of parents and cars. I stood to one side, waiting. When the bell rang, the children poured out. Leo was holding Noah's hand. Upon seeing me, Noah shouted with joy. He let go of his brother and ran towards me. "Mom, I got a star for good behavior today." I smiled and opened my arms to receive him. But at that instant, a figure dressed in a black hoodie and mask emerged from behind a tree. She moved with the speed of a predator and pounced on Noah. "Noah, look out!" I shouted, trying to intervene, but I was too late. The stranger grabbed Noah and dragged him towards an old van waiting with the engine running. "Mom, save me! Leo, help me!" Noah screamed in terror. Leo tried to bite the kidnapper, but the van's driver got out and kicked him in the chest, sending him to the ground. "Leo!" I screamed, my heart constricting. I ran after them and managed to grab the kidnapper's clothes. In the struggle, her hood fell off, revealing tangled hair and bloodshot eyes filled with hatred. "Isabella." "Let me go," she hissed, her voice hoarse, or I'll kill him right here." She pulled out a small knife and held it to Noah's neck. The cold blade grazed the boy's skin. I froze, unable to move. "No, Isabella, please, I beg you." "He's just a child." Taking advantage of my distraction, she pushed me to the ground and threw Noah into the van. The door slammed shut, and the vehicle sped away, leaving me in the middle of the street, screaming desperately, "Help! Someone save my son!" People crowded around me, but the van was already out of sight. Trembling, I took out my phone and, with fingers soaked in tears, dialed Alexander's number. As soon as he answered, I broke down. "Alexander, Isabella has kidnapped Noah. Save our son, please. Save him." Alexander's car flew through the storm. Marcus, in the passenger seat, followed the signal from the GPS tracker Alexander had secretly placed in the children's watches. The red dot stopped in an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of the city. "Faster, faster!" I urged from the back seat, clutching Leo's hand. Leo, despite the pain in his chest, wasn't crying. He stared out the window in silence, with a mature and brave expression. He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Don't be scared, Mom. Noah will be okay. Dad will save him." We arrived as night fell. A 10-story building under construction loomed in the darkness. The wind whistled through the empty windows. On the rooftop, a small figure teetered on the edge of the abyss. It was Isabella, her hair whipped by the wind. She held Noah by the collar of his shirt with one hand, while with the other she held a knife to him. Noah, pale with cold and fear, could barely cry. One wrong move, and he would fall. "Stop right there!" Isabella shouted upon seeing us. "One more step, and I'll throw him off." Alexander raised his hands in surrender. "Okay, we won't move. Isabella, calm down. I'll give you whatever you want. Money, a car, a way out of the country, but let him go." "Money?" Isabella laughed like a madwoman. "I don't want your money. I want you to suffer. I want you to know what it's like to lose everything." She looked at me with hatred. "Why? Because this maid's son deserves your love, and I deserve your contempt? I've loved you for 5 years. I did everything for you. Why are you treating me like this?" "Because you deceived me," Alexander shouted. "Love isn't built on lies. You never loved me. You only wanted to be Mrs. Sterling." "Shut up!" she shrieked, pressing the knife against Noah's neck. A trickle of blood appeared. "Mom, it hurts," Noah whispered weakly. I felt my heart break. I fell to my knees on the cold concrete. "Isabella, I beg you. If you hate me, kill me, but leave my son alone." "You shut up," she glared at me. "Today, you will witness a farewell. Alexander, do you want to save this brat? Fine, you jump. If you jump from here, I'll let him live." The wind on the rooftop raged. Isabella's proposal froze the atmosphere. I looked at Alexander in terror, shaking my head. No, he couldn't die. I couldn't lose my son. Alexander stood still for a moment. He looked at Isabella and then at Noah, who was trembling in her hands. I saw the determination in his eyes. Slowly, he placed one foot on the edge. "All right, I'll jump," he said, his voice firm. "But promise me that as soon as I jump, you'll put him to safety." "No, Alexander, don't do it!" I screamed, but Marcus held me back. Seeing Alexander on the edge, Isabella hesitated. A mixture of satisfaction and panic crossed her contorted face. She didn't expect him to be capable of sacrificing himself. "You're really going to jump?" she stammered, loosening her grip on the knife slightly. It was in that moment Marcus, who had been hidden, signaled a police sniper positioned on the opposite building. A sharp shot rang out. The bullet hit Isabella in the right shoulder. She screamed in pain. Her hand opened, and Noah fell into the void. "My son!" I screamed. My heart stopped. But quick as lightning, Alexander launched himself. Instead of jumping, he lunged forward, half his body over the edge. His hand caught Noah by his clothes just as he was falling. The boy's weight dragged him down. Isabella, in a final act of madness, stabbed him in the left arm. "Die!" Blood gushed out, but Alexander didn't let go. He gritted his teeth, enduring the pain, and held on to Noah with all his might. "Pull him up!" he roared. Marcus and the police swarmed. They subdued Isabella. Two other officers helped pull Alexander and Noah up. When both were safe on the ground, Alexander was still holding Noah tightly. The blood from his arm had stained the boy's shirt. Noah was crying inconsolably. Alexander, pale from blood loss, was breathing heavily, but his eyes shone with infinite happiness. "It's over. Daddy's here," he whispered, stroking his son's hair. I ran and hugged them both, the men of my life. My tears mixed with the blood, salty and painful. The hospital was quiet. I sat by Alexander's bed as he slept. His left arm was bandaged. The doctor said the knife had hit a tendon, but he would recover with physical therapy. Noah was fine, just scared. Leo was beside me, his eyes swollen from crying, never taking his eyes off his father's bandaged arm. Suddenly, Alexander stirred and opened his eyes. He tried to sit up, but the pain stopped him. "Don't move," I said, helping him lie back down. "You just got out of surgery." He smiled weakly and wiped a tear from my face. "Why are you crying?" "I didn't die. You look awful when you cry." I sobbed, pressing his hand against my cheek. "You're a fool. Why did you risk yourself like that? If something had happened to you, what would have become of us?" "Because I'm his father," he answered, his voice soft but firm. "A father protects his children. It's natural." Leo, who had been silent, stood up, approached the bed, and timidly touched the bandage. He lifted his dark eyes and, in a trembling voice, asked, "Dad, does it hurt?" The room fell silent. I was stunned. Alexander was frozen. It was the first time Leo had called him that. "What? What did you call me?" Alexander's voice trembled with emotion. "Dad," Leo repeated, louder and clearer. "Don't be in pain anymore, okay? I'll be good. I won't let them hurt you again." Alexander broke down and cried. The man of steel, who hadn't shed a tear when a knife was plunged into him, now wept like a child at his son's call. He extended his arm and pulled Leo to him, hugging him tightly. "It doesn't hurt. Hearing you has made all the pain go away." "I'm sorry, son. I'm sorry I was so late." Seeing them, my heart melted. All my fears and doubts vanished. I realized I could no longer deny my feelings. I loved this man. I loved his sacrifice, his regret, and his tears of happiness. I leaned in and hugged them both. Our family, after so many storms, had finally been reunited on a night of blood and tears, but also of love and reconciliation. A month later, I decided to visit Isabella in prison. Alexander didn't want me to go, but I needed to close that chapter. The visiting room was cold. Isabella appeared in a prison uniform, her hair short and unkempt. Her face was gaunt, her eyes sunken and lifeless. When she saw me, a flash of hatred crossed her gaze, but it quickly faded, replaced by resignation. "What are you here for? To laugh at me?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I looked at her without resentment. I only felt pity for a wasted life. "I didn't come to laugh at you. I came to tell you that Noah is fine. He doesn't have nightmares anymore." Isabella lowered her head. After a long silence, she whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to kill him. I went crazy." "You were wrong, Isabella," I told her calmly. "Not for loving Alexander, but for losing yourself to greed and envy. You had everything, but you didn't know how to value it, and in the end, you were left with nothing." Isabella burst into tears. "I lost. Not because you were lucky, but because you have a heart that knows how to love. I only knew how to love myself." I sighed and stood up. "Try to be better. Life is long. You still have a chance if you truly repent." I turned and left, leaving her sobs of remorse behind. Leaving the prison, the sky was blue and the sun was shining. I took a deep breath, feeling free and at peace. The past was closed. It was time to live in the present and the future. That night, Alexander told me to get ready for a special dinner. I thought it would be at a restaurant, so I put on a simple white dress. But at 7 p.m., he appeared in an elegant blue suit with a bouquet of red roses. He didn't take me to a restaurant, but to the pier. A luxurious yacht decorated with candles and flowers was waiting for us. "Where are we going?" I asked, surprised. "To find a treasure," he replied, winking at me as he helped Noah aboard. The yacht glided along the river with the illuminated city as a backdrop. When we reached the center, in front of the tallest building, the engine stopped. "Look at the sky," Alexander whispered in my ear, hugging me from behind. I looked up. Thousands of lights appeared out of nowhere like giant fireflies. They were drones. They began to move, forming images in the sky. Me cooking, Alexander awkwardly taking care of the children, the four of us walking happily in the park. I was moved to tears. He had treasured every one of those moments. Finally, the drones formed a giant phrase that lit up the night. "Amelia, will you marry me?" Applause from other nearby boats echoed across the river. I turned and saw Alexander kneeling with a diamond ring in his hand. "5 years ago, I owed you my gratitude. Now I want to spend the rest of my life paying you back." His voice trembled with emotion. "Amelia, will you marry me? Let me take care of you? Grow old by my side?" I nodded, my vision blurred by tears. "Yes, I will." Alexander put the ring on my finger and kissed me with all the tenderness and love in the world. Leo and Noah ran to hug us, shouting with joy. "Dad and Mom are getting married." In the middle of the river, under a sky of stars and lights, I felt like the happiest woman in the world. A month later, we held our wedding on a private beach. It was an intimate and simple ceremony, with only our closest family and friends. I wore a simple and elegant white dress. Leo and Noah, dressed just like their father, were our little ring-bearers, scattering rose petals down the aisle. When the officiant declared us husband and wife, Alexander, instead of traditional vows, had Marcus bring him a thick stack of documents. "This is not a prenuptial agreement," he said loudly. "This is my will and the power of attorney over all my assets." I was stunned. "From this moment on," he continued, "taking my hands, my life, my fortune, everything I have belongs to you and our children. If one day I am gone or I fail you, you will have the power to decide everything. I don't swear it with words. I prove it with actions. You are not the lucky one for marrying a millionaire. I am the lucky one for marrying you. You are the owner of my life and my heart, forever." The silence was broken by thunderous applause. Many were crying with emotion. I cried too, but with happiness. That paper was more than a material guarantee. It was proof of his trust and total surrender. I hugged him and whispered, "I don't need your fortune. I just need you." He smiled and kissed my hair. "Having me, you have everything, silly." One Sunday morning, the sun streamed in through the balcony. I was sitting in a rocking chair, rereading an old diary. From the kitchen came the clatter of pans and the laughter of my 3 men. Alexander was trying to make fried eggs. "Dad, what's burning?" Noah shouted. "It's nothing. A little toasty is crispier," Alexander replied. "Dad, let me do it. You've broken all the yolks," Leo complained in his adult tone. I smiled and closed the diary. The storms of the past were behind me. I no longer held any grudges, because without those trials, I couldn't appreciate the simple happiness of this moment. I touched my belly, where a new life was beginning to grow. I had just found out I was pregnant. I wanted to surprise Alexander at night. A new member would be joining the family, filling the house with more laughter. "Mom, breakfast!" Noah shouted, running towards me. Alexander followed with a tray, holding some misshapen, burnt fried eggs, but with a triumphant smile on his face. For the queen of the house, the chef's special dish, dark night eggs. I burst out laughing and walked towards them. Happiness sometimes wasn't mansions or grand promises. It was simply a quiet morning like this, eating your husband's burnt eggs, hearing your children's laughter, and knowing, without a doubt, that you are loved. The future opened before us, wide and full of light. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew that as long as we were together, any storm would become a simple rain that would water the garden of our happiness. My soul felt light, free, like the white clouds floating in the blue sky. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. We'll see you in the next one.